Dear speakers, dear moderators, dear exhibitors, dear poster submitters, dear participants, dear Professor Ada Jonat, dear Professor Chechanover, dear Professor Barenholz, dear Professor Krommelin, dear Professor Lammers, dear Professor Dong So Lee. Ladies and gentlemen, I could go on with this because all you deserve that you would be called by name. You are experts and you are leaders in the field. However, my speech is too short, so allow me to say just welcome to all of you attending the CLINAM 22. We are very happy that you have come. Today it is 15 years and 10 days ago that Patrick Hunziker and I were sitting in the office of a lawyer, our lawyer and current president of the foundation, Alexander Gutmanns. We were there to sign the statutes and the founding document of the CLINAM-Foundation. And now, 15 years later, we are today in a virtual meeting and really happy that 360 people have taken the choice to be with us today. They have accepted, although they would have loved to be better in a conference live in Basel. According to the WHO, COVID-19, it is not fully over. COVID-19 is there still, and therefore I am sure that you understand that to host members from 25 countries is too big a risk. As medical community, we have to be paradigm to care for the good health of all. I want to welcome especially our exhibitors because exhibiting is virtually really a dare. Online in the video lounge and during the entire summit in streams that are empty and in the all breaks, there they will show on videos and PowerPoint presentations their expertise. We here welcome Lipoid, Polymoon, Inomedica, Tecomedical, Phospholipid Research Center, Precision Nanosystems, Bionet, BioNanoNet, CyberBBN, and PR Nano. We thank cordially our sponsors because they make this event possible. Without our sponsors and donators, CLINAM could not perform the summits and its further work. We have done our very best to create a surrounding to realize a smooth running of this summit. A virtual summit needs some discipline. We must be muting our microphones when one person speaks. We must repeat the chair who might intervene. We must really respect him and listen to him. We must keep schedule on the timeline. In Zoom debates where participants ask questions, this must be done one by one and not all together at the same time to prevent a chaos. I have asked Joshua, who helped the preparation of this summit, to explain you now our virtual lounge. Joshua, please.
Thank you, Beat. Dear members of the CLINAM community, my name is Joshua Cantos, and I will be giving you a technical introduction of the CLINAM Lounge. So I will start sharing my screen like this. So first, to enter the virtual CLINAM Lounge, you go to the website, clinam.org, and then you click on the virtual CLINAM Lounge 2022. So here we are in the virtual CLINAM Lounge. There are 12 sections, and I will be going through each of them shortly. The first one is the green one here, the live stream section. This is the most important one. You all received a code by email, which you can use to enter the live streaming section. So let's explore that together. So here we are in the live streaming section. Let me get rid of this real quick. So it could be that you have to zoom out at the beginning, but it should look something like this. In the top right, we have the buttons Stream 1, Stream 2, and Stream 3. This is what you use to switch between the simultaneous going streams. In the bottom left, we have a question button. It is in German right now, but it could also be in English. This is what you use to ask questions during a session. And at the bottom, we have the debate lounges. So we have, for every stream, we have a debate lounge. And basically, this is a new addition to the summit. At the end of every session, the last 30 minutes, all the speakers, the chairs, and the participants, so that also includes you, should go to these debate lounges. These debate lounges are always open, and you can join them to engage and actively take part into discussions. Important is that these are non-recorded, so you are free to speak however you want. And be careful, because there is a debate lounge for every stream, so don't join the wrong debate lounge. So let's go back to the video lounge, to the CLINAM lounge. Next up, we have the program. This contains all the information about every session, all the topics, and all the times. Then we have the proceedings. This contains all the information about every speaker, all the postal submitters, and all the abstracts. Important is that you can easily navigate this document by going through to the index. And if you are interested in a certain speaker, you can just simply click on their name or their page number, and then you automatically go to their page. Same goes for the postal session. This section contains all the submitted postals of this year, as well as the postal prizes. So have a look at that. Then we have all the exhibitors of this year, which you can have a look at here. Then we have the Dwarf Culture. So every year we give out a Dwarf Award to outstanding performances in nanomedicine. And we also have a cultural video, which is a replacement for the cultural event we normally attend in real life summits. Next up, we have the participant list. So this list contains everyone that is involved in the summit this year. This is protected by law. So if you want to have access to this list, you have to send a request to us. Then we have the sponsors and donators. These allow us to organize the summit each year. So lots of thanks to them. Then we have the exhibitors' videos. These are also played during the live stream. The Zoom debate lounge. So these are the same links that are also in the live streaming platform. You can find them as well here. And then we have the official journal of CLINAM, PR Nano. This is all freely accessible information, so I highly encourage you to check this out. And then as last, we have the creators of this year's summit, basically all the people that helped organize the summit this year. If you have any questions or any troubles, there is an email and a telephone number here at the top. Do not hesitate to send us an email or call us. We will be right there to help you. That was the technical introduction. I hope that was clear. Thank you for listening to me. And now we go back to Beat.
Well, I think that we have tried to do everything to make it possible to have a summit that works smooth. And I would like to say that we stream all this from Zeller Media, which is doing an excellent job in the technical part. And I hope that we will all have a flourishing, nice conference. Now I would like to give my word to Viola, who would chair the other founder of CLINAM, which is Patrick Hunziker.
So good morning to you all. good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. For me, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, as I am currently in Washington, D.C. So my name is Viola Vogel, and I am a professor in the Department of Health Sciences and Technology at ETH Zurich. It is an incredible, great honor and pleasure for me to introduce Patrick Hunziker, who is, as each year, and he will give us his, in the meantime, really legendary perspective on nanotechnology advancements in the clinical context. Professor Patrick Hunziker is deputy head of the Clinic for Intensive Care Medicine at the University Hospital of Basel in Switzerland. You may recall his report last year about what he was facing in critical care units with respect to the dispersion of aerosols. Patrick studied medicine at the University of Zurich. He wrote his doctoral thesis in experimental immunology and then specialized in internal medicine, cardiology, and intensive care medicine. He enjoyed fellowships at the University Hospital of Basel, the University of Geneva, and the Massachusetts General Hospital here in Boston. He also serves as president of the International Society for Nanomedicine. But importantly, and Beat made a few remarks already, he found together with Beat Löffler the non-profit CLINAM-Foundation of clinical nanomedicine to advance the applications of nanoscience in medicine. And indeed, Beat and Patrick, you started a meeting that is visionary, and I think the entire community really thanks you for doing this. With this, you created a truly worldwide unique community, bringing together and nurturing the exchange between the technology developers in the context of grand clinical challenges. And again, a wonderful aspect of this meeting with the inclusion of regulators from different corners of the world. So you really created a community that is flocking every year and coming together in Basel. And it's a real pity that for the second time that we can only meet in Zoom. But last year it was already a very successful meeting. And so we are looking forward to this meeting too. Patrick, we are looking to hear more about your thoughts, and the screen is yours.
Thank you, Viola, for these nice and kind words. Thank you, Beat, for all the preparations and also your introductory words. I will talk this year about the landscape of precision medicine, as you have seen in the program. As always, I would like to remind myself and us that the aims of medicine are to preserve life, to preserve health, to preserve the quality of life, and medicine may handle molecules, may focus on nanoscience, but let's not forget that the real aims are individuals and society. We would like to contribute our part to a good, a fair society. The mission of CLINAM-Foundation, therefore, was from the beginning to contribute to the medicine of the future. We are not looking back too much. We would like to try to look to the future. We would like to advance nanomedicine, also using and including converging sciences to the benefit of patients and societies. The converging science tools for example, in our era of COVID-19, include nanomedicine that closes the last knowledge gap in the mechanisms of life, allows targeted delivery, produces smart materials. Then from the clinical viewpoint, we need the clinical data integration to have a full view of these multi-parameter problems, which are called diseases. We need to understand the role of the environment for health, disease, and medical management. And then we intend to targetedly treat diseases, also taking into account the information from the human genome and making and benefiting from the newest sciences like big data, supercomputing, machine learning, artificial intelligence to capture the essential, to predict prognosis, side effects, and to achieve a successful management and cost effectiveness in the individuum, not just in a cohort. Now, the era of COVID-19 is truly a success story of nanomedicine. We have a coronavirus that is the most dangerous natural nanoparticle in a century that kills millions. And on the other side, we have the nano vaccines that have been developed within record time that save millions by protecting them from the dangerous aspects of the virus infection. The COVID mRNA vaccines, and you will hear a lot of this in this conference too, are solid lipid nanoparticles pictured here, resembling a little bit a virus, but doing the opposite. Now, it's not without reason that for this, in this view, the US government is constantly sponsoring, pushing nanoscience since 20 years. You see that also this year's budget proposal includes a significant share of nanoscience funding for nanoscience, including nanomedicine. We see a little less substance financial support here in Europe. Now, if you look at the promise of the optimists at the beginning of this century and at the beginning of nanomedicine, Rocco and Bainbridge, a key person in the National Nanotechnology Initiative in the US, proposed what technology should achieve according to their view of technology. They promised a new renaissance within the 21st century based on a comprehensive understanding of the structure and behavior of matter from the nanoscale up to the human brain. They promised world peace, universal prosperity, and an evolution to a higher level of compassion and accomplishment. They promised an enhanced performance in all areas of human life, a wholly new kind of rigorous research on the nature of both culture and personality, a unification of knowledge by combining natural sciences, social sciences, and humanities, a global networked society of billions of human brains comparable to one single interconnected brain or to a larger form of biological organism, and last but not least, the predictive science of societal behavior, allowing advanced corrective actions with the goal to interdict undesirable behaviors before they cause harm to others and to support behaviors leading to greater social goods. Now that's the reality. 20 years after this promise, in Europe, we have failed to preserve life, health, and well-being for a substantial part of people living in Europe. We see the horrors of war every day. If we make a step back, look at the global view, we see that in Africa we have failed in providing a collective protection of life and health, which extends to globally. And this is particularly important because on one side we know that COVID is a globally spreading disease. It's a mutating disease so that if we don't protect the whole world, the disease will come to us in form of new variants of concern. And if you look on the left side, the vaccination rate in South America, more than 85%, In Europe, we have achieved 65%. In Africa, we are about at 20%. And if you look at Democratic Republic of Congo, where one of our person speaking here is working, we see that we have achieved 1% of the population vaccinated against COVID. Also, everybody of us has a mobile phone running on their minerals. And the question is, do they really benefit fairly from what they contribute to the world? We have also seen a global failure to converge on objective truths. So we have the topics of vaccine, disinformation, propaganda during the invasion of Ukraine, fake news, origin of coronavirus, government filtering of social media, societal surveillance, the history of the Uyghurs in China, the Querdenker motion in German-speaking Europe, and the information bubbles hitting worldwide, West, China, Russia, US Democrats, US Republicans, anti-vaxxers, all seem to live in their own little universe of limited overview of what's going on. Why are societies and healthcare failing despite rapid progresses in technologies? And one reason may be the valuation of a human life. We see that if a husband dies in the eastern part of Ukraine, his wife may be given $300 as a kind of yes, you know what I mean. Then we have the importance of a trusted government and trusted science. Key topics in the COVID-19 era, key topics in our daily life. We have the problem of access to information, fake news, disinformation, government control of internet. We have the question of personal freedoms versus government control. Then we see corruption as a key reason of failing the goals of medicine, individual and societal well-being. And we see still the north-south divide that I have already mentioned. But let's focus now more on nanomedicine, also emphasizing and taking COVID-19 as an example of what's going on. This is a slide from my introduction 2 years ago when I was showing you that our aim in medicine is understanding and stopping transmission of this virus, protecting caregivers on one side, but saving patients on the other side, diagnosing disease early on. It's a simple slide. It captures the essentials of our activities in the hospital, but nevertheless, we may have oversimplified COVID-19 to avoid ICU overload and respiratory death in the elderly and stop the pandemic by fast vaccine development. The reality may look a little bit more complex. We have achieved highly effective vaccines that are capable to protect from severe disease and death in the individuals. On the other side, we have seen that the vaccines have really allowed us to protect our healthcare systems that have broken down in a few countries, but not globally. On the other side, we know that viruses like the pox virus, for example, can be eradicated by vaccines, but we have not eradicated the coronavirus, and that hits back to us now. If you are successful in deployment of a vaccine to a sufficient number of people, you can minimize mutations, but this requires optimizing access and equity, and this will lead to sustainability. This is not what we see now globally. Also, we have not seen that the problem of long COVID, that is becoming more and more important, has been solved, and we are still only partly protected from infection with current variants and also with upcoming future variants. And this leads to this depressing image of having achieved the vaccine early on in December 2020 and still seeing consecutive waves of daily deaths due to these variants of concern spreading globally. So let me focus on these topics. COVID-19 is a systemic multi-organ disease, not just a pulmonary infection. We need to look at short-term and also at the long-term perspective in what we are doing. We need to achieve social acceptance, societal acceptance, and global access. And we need to critically look at the role of the internet in this era. Looking at biology of coronaviruses, we know that there are dozens of different cell types that are in principle entry cells for coronaviruses. And we usually think of the nasal and of the pulmonary cells that are infected, but possibly, these are not even the most important ones in the long term. We see that the brain, the astrocytes and pericytes are also accessible to the current coronavirus because it has the right equipment in receptors. If we're looking at the age-dependent health risks, so kind of personalizing the disease a little more, we know all that death hits the elderly first in coronavirus. So the death rate is 100 times higher in very elderly people than in the young. But if you look at the COVID cases with long COVID, so months to years of chronic symptoms due to this disease, we see that the peak age is much lower than the death peak. It's 50 to 60 years in the UK. And that means avoiding deaths in the elderly in COVID-19 is a very good thing. But minimizing the impact of COVID-19 on the individuals, healthcare, economy, society requires a broader view than we had in the past. And if you look at the brain in more detail now, we see that recent studies, for example, the dual study in Nature this spring has shown that with COVID infection, you lose gray matter in your brain. This is a structural feature, but you also lose cognitive function after COVID infection. This loss of cognitive function depends on the severity of the initial infection, but it hits people at every degree of infection. People we see in the hospital in the ICU, they lose on average 7 IQ points, corresponding to an aging of the brain by 10 years. And if you project this now into a European perspective of a few hundred million people, or in a global perspective of billions of people that have aging brains due to this non-mastered global pandemic, this might be end in a much worse situation in 10, 20 years from now than we feared in the beginning. So ICU cases and deaths in the elderly may only be the tip of the iceberg, and population-wise neurological long-term sequelae are still not excluded. So we could also, if we had this view from the beginning, SARS-CoV as a neurotropic virus triggering neurologic diseases, and sometimes also hitting the lung, maybe our whole strategy of avoidance would have developed differently. So the reasons for this brain damage are brain invasion by the virus and probably neuroinflammation after the virus is eliminated from the body. In some patients, we see also persistence of the virus, which are not recognized in peripheral blood samples. For Omicron, which is less dangerous for the lungs, we have no definitive long-term data on long COVID in the brain. Personalized medicine, precision is needed also in the vaccine domain. If you are less than 37 years, a woman underweight, no hypertension, non-smoking, and no high cholesterol, you benefit most from a vaccine, but I suspect that few of us fulfill all of these criteria. So the question is, does personal variation of immune response and vaccination, does this play a role? Is this important for the future? If you look at the side effects of COVID vaccines, almost everybody gets some local or systemic malaise in the day after the vaccination. This is because the doses for vaccination have been selected in the high range to achieve optimal efficacy. But we also see rare side effects like anaphylaxis, myocarditis, thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, sinus vein thrombosis, which only hit certain subpopulations of the vaccinees and which also hit only certain people vaccinated by certain vaccine types. Myocarditis is an important topic for me because I'm a cardiologist. Myocarditis occurs most frequently not in the mRNA vaccinees, but in the COVID-19 infection in unvaccinated people. So, for example, in the US, they found that 2.3% of young and university athletes show signs of subclinical or clinical myocarditis with COVID-19 infection, and only part of it had resolved at 3 months. In hospitalized patients, some cardiac involvement may even be higher. And we know from other virus diseases that long-term effects of virus infections can be damaging for the heart at the long term. We just have no data for COVID-19 in the long term yet, but this may be potentially highly relevant for the young in the future. On the other side, we see that in some age groups, like the 12 to 17-year-old boys, vaccine-induced myocarditis may appear. At the moment, it seems that this is rapidly reversible, but nevertheless, we need to find ways to protect people at all ages using vaccination strategies and other means while avoiding undesired side effects of vaccines. Why do vaccines have side effects? One is the reactogenicity of the pegylated lipid RNA vaccines. So we know that the lipids have been chosen to be highly immunogenic, but little reactogenic, but they still lead to some of the side effects we see. On the other side, it's well known from the nanomedicine community that nanoparticles lead to complement activation related pseudoallergy, so effects that can lead to systemic reactions upon injection of a nanoparticle. This is not so well studied specifically for the vaccines, but it's well known for other nanoparticles. And you also know that mRNA injection, naked mRNA injection, leads to interferon release. So lipids, PEG, and mRNA are the usual suspect of vaccine reactogenicity. Interestingly, some vaccines directly induce anti-PEG IgG. In particular, the Moderna vaccine seems to induce more antibodies against PEG than the Pfizer vaccine. And if you look at the fate of the vaccine, that we know that PEG antibodies can be boosted by the vaccine. They are associated with a higher vaccine reactogenicity, but also PEG antibodies induce a cell binding of pegylated nanoparticles. And younger persons have higher antibody titers before and after the vaccine. So one of the possible pathways of vaccine myocarditis may be that the anti-PEG antibodies lead to cell association of the vaccine to other cell types like immune cells or myocardial cells, where they are expressed into antigens that are then attacked by the immune system. So we need to understand such mechanism more in depth. The one-size-fits-all paradigm was the paradigm for the early vaccine trials. You inject the vaccine, you figure out if the patient dies, and if not, you're happy. Now, we all already know that individual persons are not so simple. We have the genome, the exposome, and the randome that determine the phenotype, the current state of a human life. And this is the Achilles heel of the cohort medicine, sometimes mislabeled evidence-based medicine. It's also a key limitation of the genomic medicine, which is mislabeled personalized because it tends to neglect the other important aspects of variability. So for mastering a pandemic, we need age-specific analysis. Young persons have a higher prevalence of infection and they have a very different social contact propensity than elderly persons, so that the young persons usually drive the pandemic even if the elderly die. So we need to model pandemics looking at interacting subgroups. And we see that more personalized vaccine strategies are capable to reduce case rates much faster, are capable to reduce deaths much better than the usually chosen simple one-size-fits-all approach. This is also important for the pediatric vaccination, where you can apply the same concept of personalized dosing, personalized vaccination to minimize the rate of infections, but at the same time minimizing the rate of undesired vaccine or infection-triggered myocarditis. So everybody needs COVID vaccination, the elderly to avoid death, the middle-aged to avoid long COVID, the young to avoid myocarditis, and everybody to avoid brain sequelae or IQ loss. Individual disease, if you get COVID, is a process, not a state, meaning that many treatments are only effective when they are given in a very specific time window. And this means that conventional one-size-fits-all randomized controlled trials, the base of evidence-based medicine, may not be adequate for dynamic disease processes. This has also been seen during the coronavirus epidemic, when we saw that the different waves and the different trial periods overlapped, leading to very different results for some vaccines, because a vaccine was developed for one variant, but then was tested during the epidemic with a different variant. So dynamic processing in pandemics are really challenging for vaccine developers and drug developers. And what we have seen in our models, in our vaccination models, is that the most important thing is early vaccination for avoiding a wave of a pandemic, and the actual efficacy of a drug is less important than the broad spread of this drug to a large proportion of the transmitters of the disease, namely the young people. So having a suboptimal vaccine for treatment of the young is much more important than having the perfect vaccine when it comes 4 months later. So new trial designs need to be found for these complex dynamic patient scenarios. For example, hierarchical weighted patient benefit studies that we have used in our Zanakinumab trial in COVID-19 in a multicenter randomized trial, where we look at a hierarchical strategy, looking at death. If the winner, if one of the in a pair, one of the people die, he loses. Then we look at ventilation time in the survivors. Then we look at the ICU time in the non-ventilated patients. And then we look at the hospitalized time in everybody. And such new designs may be important to understand treatment effects in the complex situation of a dynamic disease, in a dynamic pandemic with personalized targeted drugs. So I would like to conclude my talk by going back to the big perspective. It's not sufficient to understand what is a molecule, what is a nanoparticle, and what is a clinical trial. To reach our goal of benefiting individuals and society, not only at the short term, but also on the long term, we need to look at the question, what is man? What role does the complex physical, chemical, biochemical machine of the body play, the hardware and the operating system? But also, what is the thinking, feeling, willing aspect of a patient? Is a patient willing to be treated? What are the conditions to make him suffering? And then we need to look at the social, political, religious, metaphysical aspects. How do people interact with each other on a personal basis and from one nation to another to achieve our big goal of benefiting patient societies and have a global impact with medicine? Thank you for your interest. Now I'm open to questions.
First of all, thank you very much, Patrick. You deserve a big applause, and I do it. I hope others applaud as well.